I do not want my children, and I have 4, Piers, to die for Iraq. I don't want my children to die for Afghanistan or die fighting ISIS or Russia in Ukrainian soil. I think that is antithetical to the founding of this nation and antithetical to our great founding father, George Washington, who warned in his last declaration to the American...
Benny Johnson and Piers Morgan get into a fairly heated debate over America's responsibility as it pertains to stopping Russia and Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Piers Morgan takes the stance where he feels that America needs to basically break the bank to stop Russia, whereas Benny Johnson is more of an America First type individual that I tend to align with in this particular discussion. And, you know, let's just go ahead and check it out.
I've taken a position from the start of this. And my brother was a British Army colonel. My brother-in-law was a British Army colonel. Lots of military in my family. And it's interesting because they've completely disagreed about this from the start. I've taken a view of being very pro-Ukraine's right to defend itself against what I viewed as an illegal invasion of a sovereign democratic European country, and that everything that's followed since is in that context. But it's interesting because my brother, for example, would say it's not a war that Ukraine can win, that Russia with its superior power was never going to lose this war. Yep. What do you feel?
You know, I've been hearing that a lot lately, that Ukraine has the right to defend themselves, and I don't think anybody disagrees. But what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm supposed to fund it over here from America? Because as an America First individual, I think it's our right to defend our country. And right now, we have weak southern borders, and we need to shore up the military and get this wokeness out of our own military first. But let's continue with this video.
Hey, Johnson, welcome back to Uncensored. Always great to have you. You and I don't agree about this, but explain to me, I mean, your position, I'm going to miscategorize it, but I think your position is the kind of making America great theme means that America should put itself and its own interests first, and those interests do not include racing to the defense of a country thousands of miles away that's already had a lot of billions of American money poured into it and can't defeat the enemy anyway. Is that broadly where you sit?
Yes. And if you go talk to the progressive left, or if you go talk to anyone at a MAGA rally, they'll tell you the exact same thing. This is one of the most unifying issues in America right now, is that Americans are done having our greatest treasure, which is the lives of Americans, poured into countries that are not our own, defending territories and borders that are not our own. And then other treasures of Americans, like our national debt, our actual monies, being spent to the tune of $35 trillion in debt. What is that going to leave our children? It certainly hasn't made the world a safer place, Piers. And I'll say this, it is suicidal for Joe Biden on his way out to sabotage a peace that President Trump has promised to bring to this region, and I hope he does, because an ugly peace is better than a hot war. For Joe Biden to say that American missiles should be lobbed into the heart of Russia. Would you stand for it if Russian missiles were being lobbed into the Midwest? I certainly wouldn't.
Well, Russian missiles, well, hang on. Russian missiles are being lobbed indiscriminately into a European sovereign democratic country. They've also just recruited 10,000 North Korean soldiers to join the war. And I'm just curious, Benny, genuinely curious. I hear you, yes, and I respect your opinion. Genuinely curious, if you went back 25, 30 years, the idea that Republicans would be happy for a Russian dictator helped by North Korea to invade a sovereign democratic European country and actually want Putin to keep what he's stolen would be unthinkable. I mean, I think, for example, well, hang on. I think, okay, you can answer, but I'll add this to it.
Man, but I'm not going to allow you to categorize it.
Well, let me add this to it.
I'm not going to allow you to categorize it that way. I will. Nobody's happy about this.
I will, but
Vladimir Putin's an
hang on, let me finish.
He's a dictator.
Let me finish.
And nobody likes this war. I don't want this war to happen. I don't want this war to be won by, I don't want this war to be happening at all. I want there to be peace. I want people to stop dying.
Yeah.
Much like Israel and Gaza, I want peace. I do not want this to drag on so that it creates a nuclear conflict that might draft my children or your children into another war. You have military-age sons, Piers. Would you want them to fight in Ukraine?
Yeah, but the point I was going to make before you interrupted me was...
But would you? Would you like for your sons, you have military-age sons, you want them to go fight in Ukraine?
I will answer that question in a moment. But what I will say to you first of all is what I was trying to say before you jumped in, which was, What is the difference, just ideologically, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait? Kuwait wasn't a NATO country. Why did Desert Storm happen? Why did General Norman Schwarzkopf, encouraged by every Republican I've ever met in my life, encourage the removal of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait? What is the difference? You were basically supporting Kuwait's right to defend itself and to have freedom from a rampaging dictator from Iraq. Why are the different rules now? What changed?
There's so much that's changed, especially in the policy of the Republican Party, which is where I thought you were going with this, Piers, which is why I cracked a smile, because the Republican Party itself has now taken a stance against neocons. I would argue probably the worst decision Kamala Harris made on the campaign trail, and that's a long list. Piers, I wonder if you'd agree with me on this, is to bring Liz Cheney on the trail with her.
Totally agree.
And to say, Liz Cheney is going to be my Secretary of Defense.
Totally agree.
You go and say that to Arab communities in Michigan, and you wonder why you lose Michigan.
Yeah.
I think it's suicidal. I think people are done with neocon ideology. And to your point about Saddam Hussein, I'll say the same thing that I'll say about Putin. I'll say the exact same thing. These are dictators. They're bloodthirsty. I don't think they're to be trusted. I don't like these actions. But let me tell you, I am an American first. I was born on this soil. This is my country. I am a Native American. I'm born here. My grandparents were born here. I do not want my children, and I have 4, Piers, to die for Iraq. I don't want my children to die for Afghanistan or die fighting ISIS or Russia in Ukrainian soil. I think that is antithetical to the founding of this nation and antithetical to our great founding father, George Washington, who warned in his last declaration to the American people as he was leaving office, do not get embroiled in foreign entanglements. It's the destroyer of nations.
Okay,
and we've seen it with the British Empire.
Benny?
Piers, sorry to. We've seen it with the British Empire. We've seen it with every empire that has existed, with the Roman Empire, all the way through. And I think we should follow these wise words. And
one final point to you before I go to the others, which is, if a deal was done and Putin got to keep the land he's stolen, along with Crimea, and his next action is to go and invade Poland, just as Nazi Germany did in 1939, what should America do in that position, given that Poland is part of NATO?
Again, that would be suicidal for Russia because Poland is part of NATO, and then they would.
But what should America do?
Well, Article 5 would be enacted.
What do you think morally America should do in that eventuality?
I will have to leave it up to the military minds. Some of them are on this panel. What I'll say this, and this is my stance permanently, Piers, which is that an ugly peace in the Ukrainian war, an ugly peace, and virtually in all situations, an ugly peace is better than a hot war.
Okay, maybe
But I want to address a couple things there. Piers Morgan brought up Saddam Hussein. Well, one thing that we learned about the whole invasion of Iraq over the potential weapons of mass destruction was that we were wrong. We learned from our mistakes. And in that lesson, we learned that we shouldn't just charge into war and essentially support the neocons that essentially run the war machine, right? That feed the military industrial complex. And then what he said there, and then what Piers said there about, what if Putin goes into Poland or one of the NATO countries? Well, that's a different story than him going into Ukraine. He's been saying this whole time. I like to think of it like this. The United States has Mexico at our southern border and Canada at our northern border. I think it's pretty much well stated, whether written or unwritten or said out loud or not, that the United States does not want China or Russia to start setting up military bases and doing research in either of those two countries, Canada or Mexico. So if they started to do that, or even like up into Cuba or whatever, and so if one of those countries started to do that, we would want to push them back out. You know what I mean? And so that's what NATO has done to Russians' borders. So I can understand the perspective. I'm not being a Putin sympathist. I'm just saying that I can understand Russians' perspective. They warned we don't want NATO all up on our borders. And over the years, NATO has got up all up on their borders. So it's kind of like one of those scenarios where you back a scared animal into a corner. Essentially, it's going to lash out. And I think that's, maybe a good way of explaining what's going on over there in Ukraine right now, or at least the reason why it started. Maybe not right now, because as it pertains to, lately, Ukraine is being held up and propped up by United States tax dollars, essentially. The aid, the hundreds of billions of dollars that we've sent them, the military equipment, and even the long-range missiles that Biden approved Ukraine can start lobbing into Russia just this week, is all because we didn't keep our nose out of it. So all I know is I want that war to end. I want the people to stop dying. And nobody can really paint a clear picture of what a win would look like for either of these countries. The left, the people like Piers Morgan, they're out here saying that Ukraine, the only way Ukraine can win and settle is if Russia gives back all the land they've stolen, which to me, it's sad to say, but conquering still happens today, and that land got conquered. Ukraine couldn't defend it. Russia spent lives and money to take it, and it's just kind of one of those things that unless it can be resolved monetarily through negotiations later on, I don't think, Putin is going to ever give that land back. And so we need to be realistic when it comes to our expectations and what it's going to look like over there, which most people can't even point Ukraine out on a map. But what it's going to look like over there to when this war is over, right? And I'm looking forward to see what Donald Trump can get done in that region. I believe that he will attempt to end that war on day one like he promised. Unfortunately, it appears that the current government setup, the deep state, the neocons, the war machine, whatever, the military-industrial complex, wants to trigger World War III and make Donald Trump's job as difficult as possible, and in the meantime, get as many people killed in that war as possible. So, but like I said, I look forward to that war ending, and if you agree with that, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.